Hi, welcome. This is part three of my breakdown series by way again of this back and forth podcast conversation. Bill Church, Larry Krohn primarily, and Joel. And again, this is on the heels of this controversy erupting by way of the International Association of Canine Professionals over again punishment. And then again, this video that was put up on social media of the president using a remote caller and by way of Dylan Jones calling him out. I posted the video calling him a dog training hack. And you're seeing so much like trash talking, back and forth, infighting. And again, this just shows you the confusion. Okay. So again, you look around the dog training world, what I tell people is that, your default position or setting should be to actually look at everything that's happening and ask yourself the question, why are these things happening? What's the root cause of all the controversy, all this back and forth? And again, I put information that, again, the majority of these trainers are not willing to accept. Okay, but it makes sense. Okay, once you start to connect the dots, again, put a video talking about the issue about free will, about choices. Okay, how that plays into this counterfeit picture that sets up for so many dogs and owners. So let's play some more of this as we continue to, fill in some gaps here.
There you go. That was one time, right? Because I presented punishment in a way that makes sense to the dog, not for the idiot human that keeps doing the same shit, the small dick ego thing where you just yell a little louder and correct a little harder. But people can't get it through their heads. But the people that come watch and learn from us or the others teaching it.
Again, I have a great series on my member area. I go through this whole thing. You'll see it back and forth between Ivan Belanoff and Larry Krohn. And there's moments in there. Larry's talking about, what kind of sent him on his journey as a balanced dog trainer, talking about dogs like from remote callers, they scream but again, I talk about this whole issue about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, in terms of understanding, those core ingredients I talk about, how they're reconciled. See, that's the problem here. Being able to step back and ask questions. Okay, what's going on? And why is it so common for dog owners to end up with a counterfeit picture of change? Why is that?
They go, holy, it changes lives. Like it gives you such an advantage to the average dog trainer. And let me say one last thing and then I'll shut up. There's a lot of people jumping on in the dog training world now talking about how embarrassing this is, how stupid, how childish, this and that. They can't believe they're part of this. A lot of these people I've been friends with for a long time, and I've lost friends because of them in the past also because of their training, right? There's people that behind the scenes have called me and say, they're ripping me apart because of this video. Like, is this bad? Where I've told them, yes, it is. It's awful. I know what you did to get that. The dog doesn't lie. But people learn as they go. But you can't go from that just a few years ago to all of a sudden you're this fucking expert. It doesn't work that way. And I'm getting tired of hearing people running their mouth because I'm about to start exposing these fuckers who want to bash everyone from TWC to Dylan to anyone talking about punishment like there's nothing new out there. They know it.
Well, again, this is the thing, I mean, this is all the controversy, right? So when you embrace a lie, okay, this is what happens. The confusion, divisiveness, anger, hostility. It's just like this back and forth. They're caught in this trap because that's what, again, talk about that. So no resolution. Just keeps going on and on and on. And he's talking about exposing, and they get into the cheap shots and personal attacks, right? It's like, this force-free individual was like sidelined from this conference for a dog, died in a vehicle. But that whole thing with sidelining this person, I mean, she wasn't sidelined because balanced dog trainers actually understood what defines a process, right? She was sidelined because it was like a thing that happened that had nothing to do with, her, idea of things that way in terms of what the real, it wasn't about saying, okay, this is training's not a learning based exercise. it wasn't about identifying the real problem in the dog training world. It's this whole thing about, taking people out, but then because you'll hear it on this podcast where he talks about this individual, saying that, she's like, not dialed in or educated to what, defines, say, punishment. And so, but then these are the individuals coming to speak at their conference, right? So I'm just saying there's just so much, so much here to unpack with these trainers, but it's all related to contradictions and confusion and just divisiveness. It's all wrapped up. It's all part of it.
At all. I'm this close to start exposing people who they really fucking are. So addicted to attention on social media.
Well, good luck with that, because he's a guy that's addicted to attention on social media. See him on social media all the time. So it's like, he's one of the people. Okay, I understand. He jumps on every podcast he can, marketing this confusion. So, this is no different. So when these trainers start talking about exposing based again on what they're marketing, well, you kind of wonder, well, what does that mean? Certainly aren't going to be talking about the real problem. That's for sure.
When just a few years ago, you were fucking plastering dogs, just flattening them and getting all kinds of shit from a lot of people in the dog world. And I was getting shit because I was friends with you. They just didn't know that behind the scenes, I was telling you, that's bad training, dude. That's not good, and you have to change that. So that's a lot of stuff that goes on with me in my world that people don't get to see, right? They don't. Jay, Stephanie just brought me my beads that I got from Jay, my meditation beads.
Yeah, you need those.
Thank you, Steph.
Yeah, you bring out the anal beads next. I'm done. Okay, I'll settle down. Sorry, but this shit gets me fired up, and this is the stuff me and Joel talk about this all the time. This is the stuff that people don't get to see in public. Someone accused me today of me not giving the tips because it's a marketing scheme. Motherfucker, I've been putting free shit out more than anybody for 20 years. And now all of a sudden I'm a marketing genius. I want your business. Fuck you. Fuck you. Okay. Go learn from somebody.
It's all marketing. I mean, there's playing off the confusion. Balanced dog trainers, I mean, they're playing both sides of the fence. It's just very Zach George like. And, Larry Krohn's one of these compromisers, right? He's compromised, but he just tells people what they want to hear. I mean, it's like that the language, how he's careful. It's that pure positive balanced dog trainer, language.
You miserable fuck. Sorry.
It's showing through your frustration. And I think too that what I admire about you is it takes some balls to confront somebody and tell them the truth and let them know, look, this is shit. This is shit. And I think that we belong to a world where people try to
got that bourbon going.
And I'm guilty of this myself, of being a people pleaser, right?
Sure.
And pleasing everybody and not calling it out when they see it. And we could use more of that in the balanced community. But also, the fact is that, and by the way, our comments are blowing up with Denise Fenzi and Dylan's here. Everybody is going crazy in the comments. We see you, but we're not going there.
I don't see the comments. I'm used to being on that side.
Yeah, you should be able to pull up the
comments.
comments.
Yeah, there they are now. Okay. There they are. Love it.
So I want to go back to punishment.
Yeah.
Joel, what does punishment mean to you? Let's start there. I'm going to start with, and I'm going to ask both of you the same question. What does punishment mean to you? We can get like the definition of punishment. Let me start there. Is the imposition of an undesirable or unpleasant outcome upon an individual or group in response to breaking norms, rules, or laws.
I'm just going to give you guys an example of what I've seen. And, you got to remember that I'm a guy who trains animals, movies, TV shows, and commercials. So I'm not a guy who really is the guy that's going to talk about punishment, negative reinforcement, all that stuff. I've dealt with aggression over in my career and dealt with, doing bite work and stuff like that on the set and things like that. But I've never really worn that on my sleeve. So, so for me to talk about it, but what I will say is this, and that is that and what I've learned from these guys, and I've learned a lot more about punishment from these guys than I have in my entire career. But allowing the dog not to, a good example is just the two-line stuff, okay? And because and Larry always gives credit to Ivan, for that. And, but when that dog is, and I've just seen this over and over and over again, and that is when they have a two-line and that woman is with that dog and that trainer's standing, 15 feet away, and that dog blows up, she steps back, and that dog, all of a sudden, the mind, it wants to go to her, can't go to her, all of a sudden can't get out of it. That is true punishment. Dog is actually being punished. And the person steps back. It becomes a situation to where the dog no longer is focused on that, but it's focused on that person. And as a guy who's, as I said, as far as understanding aggression, there's a lot of people that are watching right now that know way more about aggression than I do. But I know dogs, and I've seen this stuff, and I've seen that stuff. Right? So my thing is that, when somebody asks me to define stuff, it's hard for me to define, define because I don't train dogs in the world that you guys do. But to me, that's where it's effective. And the whole point is that we've had dogs that come to our events. I've watched these guys where, we had a dog in Manchester, a pit bull, for 8 years. It was 8 years, going after people for 8 years. And literally this dog, when she stepped away from the dog just all of a sudden whipped around, started just freaking out, just, wanted to go to her and just, throwing this, just, but nothing was going, nobody was hurting the dog. The dog wanted to go to her. That's true. And Larry, and we had a few people that had issues with that. And Larry's like, and we're like, how can we have issues with it? This dog is being jacked up for 8 years by people with all these e-collars, and you have a problem.
So here's what context is. So you talk about this dog that's overly connected to someone freaking out. That's that stress low. That's just a sign the dog's holding a high level of control through the person. That's a sign there's a lot of emotion going on. So, so here they're packaging up like, well, the dog went through a lot of trauma in the past. What's wrong with that? Everything's wrong with that. Okay. In terms of getting that, owner faded in the right way, because understand when dogs are holding a high level of control, there's a stress load on that dog. You'll see the dogs at a certain level where it's like they're like stressed to the max and they're holding control at the same time. So you talk about reactivity and things. So you see that desperation. It's like, that's not healthy at all. That's not good. And then you say, well, things not working. Of course it didn't work. If that's not resolved through the relationship with that owner, fading them in the right way. And I talk about right way, I'm talking about the right language through those core ingredients line up socially, right? It doesn't happen. Anything you bring into the mix, whether it's a remote call or whatever, of course it's not gonna be beneficial. It's not gonna be helpful. It's gonna put more stress on the dog. So you always have to understand this has to go back to the relationship with the owner.
Problem with this.
Got its ass kicked for 8 years. That following week, that woman was posting videos of that dog dock diving around people, dogs, everything. Yeah.
And that literally, and Larry will tell you the same thing. So we go inside. So then we go outside. They go outside.
The bourbon going here. The trash talk is going to increase here over time. So, but again, understand that, we talk about, when these trainers are offering up illustrations of things, okay, understand that you have to be able to default back to what's your foundation to reveal what's really happening. Okay, the current state of relationship. See, that's the problem here. They don't default back to that. That's not part of how they approach training that way. And so when you ever hear illustrations about, oh, they sent video and this is all great, well, I'm immediately going to question that to say, is it really? It might be. I doubt it. But see, that's the problem here is like you have to be able to, everything follows a sequence. And that's not understandable. So whenever you hear these trainers to this podcast give up illustrations of certain things about how they are, question is, well, is it a real picture of change or is it a counterfeit? Because that's not the criteria. The criteria I talk about is not part of balanced training. Okay, from the get-go. That's not how they jump into a relationship problem. It's a good image here to stop. It reminds me again of of a Christopher Upton with his podcast, drinking on, and things, the trash talking's just increases.
Side with Doc. Oh, Doc has problems with cars and stuff like that. Larry's like, let's take it out there. There's a road going by. They take it out there. Literally, they worked it out. Like one or two times they did it. Boom.
10 minutes.
And it's not to say that it's magic, but you're asking me about punishment, Bob. And as I said, I'm not the guy, the true guy that's going to tell.
Hey,
but
Joel,
I mean, I hope that explains.
Joel, that's Bill, not Bob.
Bill, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Bill.
I own bowwowbobs.com too because the B. Yeah,
He's now Bob My Knob dog training.
Shut up, Larry. Screw you. All right. Sorry, Joel. Do you remember what you were talking about?
So anyways, hopefully that explains a little bit about what I've seen with these guys and stuff like that. So.
Well, and what I hear too, what Larry's saying is that the dog wasn't prepared in the case that he was given, and so I want to add to you, Larry, like what, how do you define punishment? But, and what role does rapport and the individual dog play in how
Massive, right?
Yes.
So what I have to say 100 times during a 3-day seminar is I don't do this, guys. I'm teaching you. I want you to understand I don't have to do this because when a dog comes to me, I have time. I have time to give it what it needs. And then a lot of times you don't get.
So here, you brought up the word rapport. Okay, I understand that this is like another cautionary tale. When you're engaging a relationship problem, you go watch the Tom Davis video. Okay, highly encourage you to watch the Tom Davis video. America's Canine Educator calls himself, where he has a Doberman that has hit the aggressive level, and he's talking about, I want to build rapport with the dog. He's out there with playing the game of tug, okay, letting the dog express control, and he gets redirected on right after the moment that suddenly, again, this is the whole kind of mess of the confusion of corrections, right? And there's a moment I point that out in the video where he lets his dog express control. There's no the core grades aren't reconciled properly, and then he corrects his dog at a certain moment of his choosing, right? He's like, oh, now dog's not going to a sit, I'm gonna correct it, and then he gets redirected on. Okay, that contrast, right? So you have to be very aware when you talk about rapport. Well, what does that mean? Okay, it's like you have to think about stepping into a role. Just like you say, if you're a step parent, you're stepping into a role with an already selfish child. As a step parent, you're trying to be the friend. Okay, you have to be very aware of these relational dynamics. Okay, with the core ingredients I talk about, it's not just about buddying up rapport. Because again, that can offer up a false. It's like the being the friend instead of the parent. That can offer up a false image of change. I'm saying these trainings aren't dialed into the reality of that stuff. Okay, so when they use certain words right away, I'm like already alarm bells are going off, saying, okay, what do they mean by that?
Get those behaviors. You understand? But if I tried to punish a dog on day one for trying to come after me or go after a dog or something, it's going to be very difficult, right? It's not there. I'm putting a dog in a situation.
Yeah, he put the bite suit on. Okay, I understand. It's not about understanding the role of influence that way, right? He's talking about because you understand that this is superficial. So for him, because the advocates using the bite suit for an aggressive dog, it's ridiculous. So I'll stop part 3 here. I'm going to keep going through all this to navigate all these talking points, go through. But again, I'm saying this is on the heels of the controversy that's all breaking loose by way of the International Associated Canine Professionals over, punishment. And then these videos popping up of the president, and then you have these other balanced trainers slamming him. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. But that's where we're at. Understand this is, and then the egos involved, and the pride, and the stuff going on here. What a mess. So stay tuned for part 4.